As a DM, how do you offer up a unique challenge to jaded veteran player characters who've bravely confronted and defeated terrible monsters, villainous sorcerers, demonic entities? Well, some of these ideas can be found in a setting released in the 1990s by TSR. Welcome back to DGS Presents. This is the first in a series of Ravenloft discussions, and today's episode we're going to discuss the fear, horror, and madness rules and concepts for 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. But these rules could be used also in 1st edition and certainly were revised for newer editions such as 3.5 and even 5.0. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring on board here DM Greg so we can discuss these things.
Hello again.
How's it going, Greg?
It's going awesome, dude. Thanks for having me.
Good. Now, the rules and concepts were first introduced in the Ravenloft Realm of Terror box set that was released back in 1990, and the authors were Bruce Nesmith and Andrea Hayday. Nesmith wrote a bunch of things for TSR, and he actually worked from TSR, I think from 1981 to 1990, or maybe 1993, and then he left to work in the video game industry. But he has a lot of great credits under his name. Now, what we can do is, because this was such a cool box set, I'd like to show you a quick unboxing to see what was inside. All right, everyone, this is the Ravenloft box set from 1990 for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. And really quick, I just wanted to check out to see what's inside because there's some really cool stuff in here, actually. Aside from the rule book, which has great black and white art, like that, for instance, like Jonathan Harker, right, being attacked by the vampiresses. Aside from that, we also have a bunch of kind of cardboard cutouts that have rules and tables on them. For instance, like new magical spells or modifiers to turning undead in Ravenloft. We'll talk about all that in later episodes. Then we have our Ravenloft families, right? Our dynasties, like the Rainier family or the Weathermay family, the Dionair, the Delicinia, the Boritzi, the Timothy. I think they're werewolves, if I remember correctly, right? The Timothy family. In addition to that, we also have this transparency here for outdoor movement, which is kind of cool. It's kind of nice that they included that. And then we have these cardboard cutouts. I believe there are 16 of these different castles. Like, for instance, Castle Ravenloft. There's a monastery in here. There's manor houses for some of the families. And all of these, they don't have full maps in the back of them, but they do have kind of suggested areas for the characters, the PCs, to go explore, and you're kind of invited to do your own maps if you want to. And there's a whole bunch of these, like I said. And then finally, there's a few other things in here. There are 6 full-color maps that fold out. In addition to the regions of Ravenloft, the different provinces and everything, we also have the old Cardigan Inn in here, and then we have, for instance, the islands of Madness and Despair, and then some city maps as well. So there's a lot of really cool things in here. This was a pretty good value for back in the day. So now, did you actually own the box set there, Greg?
I have not. However, because I'm as close to a 1E purist as possible. But dude, that is definitely that's a great box set. That brings me back to the Greyhawk box set. That's just all the inclusive different parts. That's a great box set to have.
Yeah, there were a lot of cool things in there. And they didn't stop there, because in 1994, they actually introduced a new box set called the Red Box. I don't know if that was the official name, but it was an update of the Ravenloft box set, and it had within it some rule additions. I think might have been some new monsters and concepts in there, but the madness rules, which we're going to discuss today, actually were in this set. After that, I believe in 1997, they introduced the Domains of Dread, which was basically a book. It wasn't a box set anymore, but there's a lot of cool stuff in here as well. It downplays the psionics a bit. Other than that, it's got some neat additions. Like I think Cass is in there. Vecna and Cass are in this particular Ravenloft book. So there's some neat new things.
Well, I was excited.
Now, but
I was excited when you invited me in to talk about fear, horror, and madness, because being a first edition DM, I could see how this could fit in and expand on some of the things that are in the first edition anyway. So I'm excited. Thanks.
absolutely. And that brings us actually to our first concept, which is fear. Now, Greg, as you know, in obviously first edition D&D, fear was a thing. You had certain creatures that could cause fear just by virtue of a special power or attribute that they had. But the Ravenloft box set or campaign setting, the Realms of Terror, takes this to another level, right? It actually introduces formal fear mechanics that we can use as DMs to really challenge the players. So let me bring this up here. How does fear work? Well, let's say your party encounters something, some kind of threat that's so terrible and so overwhelming, you know that you're completely outmatched. So here it says, and this is from the book, that some of the criteria here might be that the hit dice of the threat are more than double the total hit dice of the entire party. So the adventurers actually confronting the threat. So obviously, Greg, you know, as a party, you don't really know what the hit dice of a creature might be, right? That's an abstract concept, right? So there's some DM's discretion has to be played out here, right?
Right. And I think that number one, though, it's a great point that probably is not going to happen all that often, but it makes sense, right?
It does. And number two here, it says the maximum damage that the creature can inflict is enough to kill the hardiest character in the group in just one round.
That's scary.
In this case.
Yeah. That would be
the hardiest.
Like a fireball, like a fireball spell from a high level.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I thought of immediately was like you're climbing up the spiral staircase of a moldering, ancient, haunted crypt or keep. And you encounter some skeletal warrior, and he's got some massive broadsword, and your hardiest fighter goes up there to engage him, and he just lops the player character's head off with one shot, one swing. So the rest of the party immediately realizes, oh boy, we're like way overmatched here. We're going to get totally destroyed. Another criteria here that we can look at is number 3. Adventurers who can't cast spells do not have weapons of sufficient magical strength to harm the creatures. So any creature that requires magic to hit, especially powerful magic.
Right, like a golem or something like that. You know, actually, when I was reading through these rules, and thanks for sending them over in advance, is these things are really within the DM's control, not the player's control. So in the box set, it does spell out specifically these should not be used frequently, right? They should be infrequent. But I think a good DM can find a way to kind of wiggle these in there. But no, this is a great little set of rules. So,
yeah. So what happens with this is that if you are confronted with such a situation in which fear, it comes into play here, you have to roll a saving throw versus paralyzation, and your magical bonus, right, for resistance bonus for high wisdom comes into play.
Yep.
So that is, of course, in the player's handbook. Let's see what page is that on? I don't remember.
12,
17.
17.
Yeah, just because I'm so exact.
You have it in front of you. That's why.
Yeah,
dude, I love
17 of the player's handbook. Remember your bonus to your saving throw for paralyzation based on your wisdom. That does come into play here. And there's other things that we have to look at, which are up on the screen here, the table of fear modifiers. So if you have a spell specifically helpful against an encounter, you get a +4 bonus to your save. So what kind of spells would you think that would come into play here, Greg, that would give you this a bonus?
All right. Well, I've been when I read through the rule set for, so we can prepare and have this conversation, which, dude, so totally excited because I'm seeing transferable applications to 1E. So anyone out there that's playing first edition AD&D, this is cool. So I was thinking like a bless spell, right? A bless spell gives you +1 to hit, +1 to saves, and it boosts your morale by 10%.
Yep.
You know what? I'm inclined to say as a DM, if someone casts a bless, you walk into a room and you're subject to fear in first edition, let's say a ghost, let's say a demon or a devil, let's say a fear attack, and you fail, you would get not only just that 1 bonus to save, I guess that's first edition would be +1, but it's relevant. And I just love it. I think this application is, I could see me implementing this in our game.
And how about protection from evil?
Protection from evil, absolutely.
That'd be a good one, especially if you're coming up against something spectral or something demonic or something that's going to basically terrify you, right? It's going to inflict fear upon you. Bless, chant.
Yep, chant, absolutely. If you have a cleric who's willing to stand out of the fray and chant without interruption, absolutely.
Yeah. So all that stuff will work. Also in here, magical item specifically helpful against the encounter, +4.
If you know it, right? If you know you have that ability within that weapon, I agree.
Sure. So let's say same situation, skeletal warrior. He's coming down that spiral staircase. He's got this either a broadsword or a two-handed sword. He's coming at you, but you just happen to have a mace of disruption. Or something similar, or some magical weapon that's effective, let's say +3 against undead. That's going to give you a +4 bonus to your saving throw against fear. So you're not quite as afraid against that skeletal warrior.
Well, and you notice the difference between second edition, this rule set, and first? First is a series of separate spells or benefits that add up cumulative to give you modifiers. This table is a flat +4 for something, right?
Right.
So as a DM, if you had a bless spell, I'm not going to give you a +4 to save, right? I can give you +1 because that's the bless. But if you couple that with a magical item specifically for that, like you said, like a mace of disruption and the cleric's in the front, maybe I'll give you a +2, +3, right? Give some type of modifier, but I love the concept. I think it plays well in first edition.
Yeah, and then of course you have friend or family endangered. You're going to be braver if it's your wife endangered or your friend.
Right.
Facing a threat again on the same day, +1. Okay, you're a little braver the second time around. Know how a similar encounter was defeated.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
But of course, the last one says defeated previously by a similar encounter, right? If you lost once against the skeletal warrior, you're not going to want to face them again, and you're going to be really, really afraid.
Right. No.
Now, there's a couple other things here in the book. The emotion spell from second edition, which is a 4th level wizard spell, can give you +2 to the save. And I don't think the emotion spell wasn't in first edition, right, Greg?
It was.
I don't remember that.
No, it was not.
That is a second edition spell that can be used to help you out there. Another good one is, which I have here in my notes, is that let's say you're going up against vampires, but you have the Sun Sword, which is from I6 Ravenloft. Let's say you find the Sun Sword in the crypts. That will help you against the vampires as far as the save goes against the fear.
Right. I think the Sun Sword was actually made its first debut in Unearthed Arcana. I think it's found in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you might be right.
You swing it around and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. So yeah, it's absolutely wonderful against vampires.
It sparks. Yeah. It sparks with the sunlight. Now, if a PC fails the save, he will run away and potentially drop what he's carrying. So you remember back in first edition, how did, like, when you totally freaked out and he ran away. What happened as far as dropping the weapon? Do you remember, Greg?
It's consistent. It's consistent with this. You have a percentile chance of dropping what you have in your hands. It's like a 50% chance. I think there's a diminishing based upon level, but the concept is exactly the same. As if you fail your fear check, you have a chance of dropping what you have and running. And first edition is pretty simple. It's like 3 to 12 turns, and that's it. This actually enhances the DM's ability to make a creative storyline. I like this.
Yeah, in the actual in the black box, it says that it's a 60% base chance of you dropping your weapon if you are fear struck. Each level above first grants an additional -5%, which is actually a bonus in this case. So a 10th level PC has only a 15% chance of dropping his or her weapon, and the minimum chance is 10%. Now, if a PC is cornered, he or she can fight at -2 to all die rolls. So if the creature has, instilled fear in you and you're terrified and you're running away and you get cornered and this thing confronts you, you can fight at -2, but that's to all die rolls, including saving throws. So not a situation you want to be in.
Well, in first edition, what it doesn't, or at least I haven't read, that it doesn't give the DM this breadth of detail on how to manage one of those situations, where in Ravenloft, in the fear, horror, and madness rules, it talks directly to, if you fail your fear check and you turn and run, the creature, if it wins initiative, it has the ability to get a free attack, which is first edition, right? If you're leaving melee, they get a free attack. And then if you run, it talks to having the creature follow you, which first edition does not. So I like that, where it gives the DM kind of a lead in that says, you know what? Why would a ghost not chase the person down the hallway? Right? It's a unique opportunity. So I really like the way they spelled out these rules, and it gave me some ideas on how to torture my players.
Yeah, and if that weren't bad enough, the Ravenloft box set also introduces this idea of horror, which is a little bit different and maybe worse than fear. But what is horror?
You have no idea. But I'm going to show you.
Now, there are horror rules. And the way this whole thing works is that horror is something that invokes a certain amount of revulsion, anguish, and repugnance. And there's also a certain surprise element to it, as it can involve the unexpected. So one of the, I think it's the second box set, the red box, says, let's say your player character is observing a maiden, disrobing and getting ready to go for a swim in a pond. And, first she takes off her dress, but then she takes off her head. So it's like this surprise, freaky thing that happens, right? That's just completely out of left field. Or from the world of literature, right? Finding a mad woman in the attic. You're not expecting that. You go up in the attic, you open up the door, and there's some emaciated, toothless mad woman in the attic. She's been locked in there for like how many years, right?
Right.
Or remember that movie, The Changeling, when there was the haunted little child's wheelchair? It was all cobweb covered, and they're up in the attic, and the wheelchair like turns to face the person that opened the door, and then like comes at you like something's crazy.
Right.
That's something that invokes horror, right? Which is more deep, more like kind of existentially deep than fear, and it has a different result, different possibilities here that get brought out. So up here we have how to make a horror check. Like the die roll for fear, a horror check is a saving throw against paralyzation. This is going to be a common theme tonight, right?
Yeah.
The character's magical defense adjustment for wisdom also applies in Player's Handbook. And the table here lists the common modifiers to a horror check. As a DM, you're encouraged to apply others as you see fit.
Right.
So the character's lawful good. You get a negative to your save. I mean, why would that be, Greg?
Well, I was reading this one and I'm like, you know what? That makes sense. Well, if you're lawful good, you're probably not exposed to the horrors that could be so deeply rooted in evil. That's why you are lawful good and you want to vanquish evil all the time, right? You don't want to let it spread, but you never really get deep into the weeds. I could see that. Yeah.
And now, if you're evil alignment, you're going to get a bonus.
Absolutely.
You're used to awfulness.
You're at home.
But yeah, you're at home. And of course,
Right.
if a character knows a person in the horror scene, it's worse. It's -2, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or worse if it's a family member or a close friend.
Correct.
Close quarters, you can't get away.
Right.
It's a -2 to your save. But of course, if it's an open area, if you have somewhere to run, you get a +1.
Right.
Now, if you fail your horror check, all kinds of bad things happen. And it starts with the PC being stunned for 1 round. So you're just flabbergasted. You're just transfixed. You can't even move. You're just so overwhelmed by what you see that you can't do a thing for a single round. And after that, you have to roll a d6 to determine what happens next. Now, 1 through 6, number 1 is something called aversion. Now, if a PC cannot bear to look upon the scene, if he has this aversion, and he must stay 30 feet away, and if he doesn't, he becomes fear-struck, and this lasts a month. Fear-struck is you basically is like a failed fear check, right? You're terrified, you drop your weapon, you run away, and then you save at -2 afterwards. Now, if you roll a 2, it's revulsion, which is a stronger version of aversion, in which a PC cannot even bear anything resembling the horror. So, for instance, red wine or rare meat might remind her of a bloody scene, that ritualistic murder that she witnessed, and this lasts for a month. So you just freak out if you see anything that looks like blood. If you roll a 3, it's obsession, which results in, I really like this one. This results in sleepless nights, and you can't stop talking about what you saw. You're just completely obsessed with it, and you can't sleep at night. And if you're a fighter, or let's say a ranger or a thief, you have -1 to combat rolls for every night that you're up, freaking out about this and just having horrible nightmares and babbling and whatever. Priests and wizards cannot memorize spells because they can't sleep.
I like that. I think that's pretty cool.
I think that is really cool. And then you do get a saving throw once per week. So, that is not you. That's bad, right? So if you get obsessed, it's not a good thing. Number 4, if you roll a 4 on a d6, senseless rage. You attack the horror scene at +2.
I agree.
And you'll continue attacking until the saving throw after 3 rounds. And a similar scene could cause the PC to fly into a rage again if he or she does not save at -2. So you just totally freak out, and you just keep attacking. Even after the thing is dead, you just keep pounding on it. Number 5, mental shock. You're stunned for 3 rounds, and then you have to make a saving throw after that. Repeated horror checks are at -2. And number 6 is what I mentioned before, which is the fear struck, which is equivalent to a failed fear check. And then you save at -2 afterwards. So that is horror. Now, think about it. I mean, how can you integrate this into an image? I mean, I saw this and I'm like, oh, there's all kinds of things I could do with this. I mean, I could get totally crazy with the horror.
There is absolutely. And I was thinking about ways to implement it to our 1E game. And one, I think as a DM, you have to, and it spells out in here, this should not be a common thing, right? It should be once in a long time. But as a DM, I've already been thinking, I mean, you walk into a room and one of your party members, that I may have to capture one of your party members and have them dragged away so that you can witness the horror scene, and then we can all roll. Dude, I'm trying to come up with some ideas. I think this would play out very well. I mean, I could see it. It would be fantastic. And no, I like the way they laid this out. But what's also nice, Colin, is they gave ideas for removal of fear, removal of horror, right? A cleric could cast remove fear. I would even go to the extent of a cleric casting bless, giving you an immediate save, right, against the horror. Or remove curse, maybe not so much, but finding ways to bless the party and bring them back to a sanity or a level of sanity. But I definitely think this I'm going to say once a year in real time, twice a year maybe, but depending upon the setting, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, don't hesitate to add this stuff to your game.
Oh, I'm not. I already have ideas for tomorrow
this is, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, because the next thing in some ways is even worse, but it's very, very rare. But we have to talk about madness. Now, this was introduced in the 1994 Red Box set, and it was also dealt with in the Domains of Dread book. Now, madness is something that there's a lot of DM discretion here about how madness might happen.
Yep.
But one way it can happen, or the primary way it can happen in the context of a game, is that if a spellcaster, like let's say a wizard or a priest, is engaged in some sort of mental connection with another person or an entity, or let's say a monster of some kind, there is a chance that after tapping into that mind, it could infect their own mind.
Yes.
With the turbulent maelstrom of insanity and depravity and just craziness, and drive them insane. So many spells, according to the book, allow a PC to peer into the mind of another, and this could lead to madness. And those include Bloodstone's Frightful Joining, which is a spell from 2nd edition. And there's also Strahd's Frightful Joining. ESP, No Alignment, Wizard Sight, or the priest spells Commune, or, and this is the one we talked about, my favorite, Speak with Dead.
Yeah. That I liked. I liked the way they incorporated this, because there's also not just spells, right? There's magic items too, right? Amulet of ESP, crystal ball with telepathy. I mean, as a DM, what I like is this 2nd edition rule set from Ravenloft gives me ammo for 1st edition that makes sense. And I'm not saying it in its entirety. Part and parcel to this, I think there's some great applications for 1E.
Yeah, there's some great role-playing options here. For instance, if the cleric or the priest, if it's 2nd edition, is trying to speak with the dead of somebody that was like horribly murdered, let's say.
Right.
There's a risk now, right?
Yes.
like I don't know if you want to tap into that mind. You could discover some things that are so horrible it makes you mentally unhinged.
Right.
Now, same thing is that you have to make a saving throw versus paralyzation. Wisdom bonus applies.
Right. And what are the possible outcomes, Colin?
Yeah, the possible outcomes. Let me see here. Let's bring up this failed madness check results. If you look at the top of this document, if we roll the 1d6, if you indeed go crazy, if you roll the 1, get schizophrenic. Right? You go schizophrenia. Or 2, depression. 3, paranoia. Hallucinations, amnesia. All kinds of things can happen, and these have different types of effects. So, for instance, if we look at schizophrenia, in this case, the rules slightly differ between the editions, but the PC's mind basically splits into on the page 37 of the Red Book, the PC splits into 12 distinct personae. So in the Domains of Dread book, has it even worse. Your mind like fractures and all these different fragments and stuff. I think it's like 10d10 or something crazy. This can have a number of effects. Now, primarily your psionic ability, if you have any, could be impacted by this schizophrenia, because now
Right.
you're not entirely in control of your faculties, and you're not in control of who you are anymore. So the host, the primary personality, will retain his or her defensive psionic capabilities, but you may lose some of your offensive capabilities. And I think it says in the book it's 75% chance that you retain it. But there's also this D12 rule that you can do to see what your new personality looks like. If you see on the screen there, like for instance, if you roll a 2, you're passive, submissive victim, and you only you only retain your psycho-supportive psionic disciplines, and you lose all the other ones.
Right.
So you can't go do like a psionic blast or a psychic crush on anybody anymore because you're passive, submissive, right? If you roll a 9, you're bratty, smart mouth child, and
I could
you
see a good
only
player. I could see a good player having fun with this.
oh yeah, you could just go crazy with this, right? So like the bratty child would retain telepathy but lose everything else. Number 12, you're a spiteful accuser. You retain psychokinetic abilities, but again, everything else is not available to you anymore. So that is schizophrenia. You can also suffer from, let's pull up amnesia. This one's a little bit different. Amnesia is, of course, where you forget everything that happened, and the previous effects of fear and horror check failures are removed. Can't remember what happened. Dracula attacked me. I don't know. I don't know if he attacked me. I don't remember it.
Well, and I think there's 2 first edition spells, and of course, translating this to first edition because I try to, a heal spell I would probably consider as high enough level to cure these ailments, but also a restoration spell.
Yes, we will. Those will remove insanity. And if you, and we'll get to that in a sec, but with amnesia, you have to roll twice on the following subtable to see, like it says that if the PC suffers a permanent personality and alignment change, if they're amnesiac, and they have to roll this D6 to see what combination of, let's say, chaotic good or lawful good or chaotic evil, what basically becomes of their alignment, because it permanently changes. Now, there's also a few other things here. There's severe depression, and that leads to a 50% chance of the PC will just do nothing. So it's like, oh, let's go off adventuring. It's like, yeah, no, I don't feel like it, right? Delusions. A PC thinks he is someone famous, even of a different sex. Paranoia, that speaks for itself. You're completely just paranoid. You can barely function. Or hallucinations, where you see bugs everywhere.
Right.
All of these are very debilitating. Now, you mentioned, Greg, and rightfully so, that if a priest has a spell of heal or restoration, he or she can cure the madness. Otherwise, it can be basically permanent.
Yeah.
A psionicist can use something called psychic surgery. That's on page 95 of the Psionics Handbook. And you can use psychic surgery to correct this. But if you remember from Psionics Handbook, it's a low roll. It's a power check. And if you roll a 20, which is a catastrophic failure on your psionics check, the surgeon himself must make a madness check.
Oh, wow.
And the patient remains insane. So the surgeon himself could go completely insane after trying to conduct psychic surgery on a patient who is himself insane.
I'm looking at the first edition psionics, and I really don't see. I mean, maybe mind over body, but that's an individual spell. Yeah, I think that you have to wait till second edition to get that psychic surgery. I know that wasn't first edition, but I don't think there's anything necessarily that would be applicable unless a psionicist attacked the player character suffering from this ailment and rolled on the chart in the DMG, and the result was a alteration of this condition. That's quite possible. We'd have to look
Yeah,
into
good point.
Yeah.
And
this would make a game more challenging for a DM. So I think it's good advice, right? Don't use this too often. Use it appropriately, because if in fact it does get applied, you as a DM have more work to do.
right. There's also something called hypnosis. And a wizard can use this spell during sessions. So if the wizard, the wizard is just hypnosis, basically. And the patient rolls a paralyzation check, and if he fails, the session was successful.
Huh.
Spells like ESP can provide -2 to the save. So I love this. I thought this was totally cool because I thought about Adventure Module I-10, Ravenloft,
Right.
the house on Griffin Hill, right? Ravenloft 2, where there's the sanitarium and where they're treating the insane in there. And I had it in my mind that it was like the mesmerist pendulum and all that, where a wizard or a doctor of some kind is using this hypnotic, either a spell or some sort of ability to tap into the mind. And maybe one of the other player characters was using like ESP to try to like read the mind while they were doing it, to try to discover the underlying torment or what was going on with this person's mind, and there's something supernatural was actually happening to them. So I thought this was really cool with the hypnosis.
I've thought about is this, if you're a DM who's willing to add this to your game, first or second edition, right? This makes an illusionist more relevant and more powerful. Let me explain. An illusionist has hypnotism as a first level spell. So one, they now have a healing, right? An opportunity to heal these ailments, but also imagine their phantasms, imagine their illusions, because you can induce fear, horror, and madness as a result of a good illusion. So because in first edition, the illusionist, there's really no expanse of that, right? It's up to the DM to manage the illusions, their effect, their duration, and so on. But this actually adds some dimension to an illusionist. I like it.
It does. Yeah. So, use your imagination as a DM with this stuff, because as I said at the beginning of the video, this is a way to challenge, your powerful, kind of confident player characters who've, been there, done that, they've seen it all, they think they can handle everything. But when they're within the mists of Ravenloft and they're brought into the domains of dread, they're going to face things that are truly unhinging mentally.
Right.
Attack the spirit and the mind. So attack the mind, make them scared. It intimidate them, because it makes sense, right? Not everybody has got this like iron will that they can handle anything.
And especially when you're a lower level adventurer, right? I mean, you're a hardened adventurer.
Attack the body, attack the mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it brings up the concept of different monsters too, right? I mean, imagine being a low level character, and facing a gargoyle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one, they don't have a fear effect, but a gargoyle is just scary. So,
yeah, I mean, think of something like a son of Cuse, or some of those undead creatures out of the Fiend Folio, like the Hukuva, or Coffer Corpse.
Yep.
That stuff would be just terrifying to see. I mean, it would just make you completely just unhinged. And there's also either spectral entities,
right?
Ghosts. We talked about that whole episode about ghosts.
Yeah,
and those instill fear, right, when you see them magically.
Yeah.
Add horror to it. These books, these Ravenloft books, basically tell you, it's like, don't be afraid to add both fear and horror into the mix if it's something really terrible. So a ghost might naturally instill fear, but if the sight of that ghost in their current state is so horrifying. Let's see, it's some beheaded, child or something, like something, really terrible to behold. It can also invoke that revulsion, right? That aversion, and you just can't handle it. And there's lots of examples from books and literature and films. I saw something the other day which was just an awesome example of this. I was watching a Korean show, and it was called Hotel de Luna, and it was a hotel for ghosts
Sounds
that
horrible.
exists between this world and the next. And in that hotel, like, all the ghosts are generally nice for the most
Right.
part, right? They might look funny, they might have holes in their head and all this other kind of stuff, right? But there's one ghost in like room 13, which like nobody goes into. And heaven forbid any mortal person who isn't dead goes into that room. Because as a woman who owns a hotel explains, is that the mere sight of this thing will drive you permanently insane.
Wow.
And this guy, of course, gets in there, by accident or whatever, and his ghost is inside a dresser, and it's like coming out, and these like these ethereal tendrils and stuff are coming out, and you see these eyes and all this stuff, and it looks totally freaky. And he
That'll do it.
bolts. Luckily, he doesn't see it, but and later this thing gets loose,
Right.
and starts terrorizing like the city. So awesome example of just keep it scary, make your adventure scary. And if you see something cool on TV or film or literature or whatever, incorporate it in.
Well, and that's the point, right? That's why we're talking about this. Is I think fear, horror, and madness, they have their applications in any game, right? Any edition. And I think fear is, what these rules do, and I like, is they define fear. They give you more specifics around what could happen, what should happen, what may happen. And then it introduces that level above. It introduces horror, which is nowhere to be found in first edition.
And madness.
That's right. And then beyond horror is complete madness, which is the result of. So no, I definitely see us working some of this into our 1E campaign. And this is why I say, right? You know me. I try to be a first edition purist. Except when you have good content like this that you can apply it sparingly, work it in, and make the storyline just that much more epic. It's fantastic. It's a great idea. Thanks for inviting me, man. I love this content.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming, Greg. And we will wrap it up here. Again, if you like what we're doing here, we're having fun. Please like and subscribe. We have a lot of cool content coming up. We're going to do a lot more with Ravenloft. I think we're going to talk about the liches. Right, Greg?
We're going to pull them out.
Got to look at that lich book, probably the vampire book too. I love my vampires.
Yeah, Lich is my
I already
favorite
talked about
undead.
the ghost a bit.
Lich is my favorite undead. Vamp might be yours.
Oh yeah, probably a ghost is mine. But
yeah,
but there's so much good undead.
Yeah.
So yeah, some cool upcoming episodes. So again, we will see you all very soon, and thanks for tuning in. See you soon.
Take care.